there, grass rats! Have you subscribed to our new channel, Taryl Fixes All Skids? What are you waiting for? Go over there and subscribe, or I'm going to hit you with this hammer. Pterodactyl here. Today's video is going to be on this here. Another Crapsman Eager 1. And what's unusual about this lawnmower is this one does not have a governor. There's no governor on it. It's completely gone. There is no governor lever coming out of the side with a spring or any of that stuff. This was something they came up with for a minute on this Eager 1 engine. This is a 20-inch walk-behind mower, probably from around 1970. And this thing's in bad shape. The front wheels, at least the two front ones, are froze. It's got no compression. It's got no spark. And I think it was underwater. And we're going to try to get it running. Alright, the first thing I'm going to try to do is get this recoil to start working. And I think probably just got to lubricate it. So I'm going to take that cover off where the spring is, because this has got that vertical pull. I remember working on these back in the day. What's nice about this, it's got this little wedge right here on the rope guide, and you could actually lock that rope in there for you to hold it out of your way when you remove this cover. But I think it just needs to be lubricated. I mean, I don't want that spring to be under any kind of, it's going to have a little bit of tension on it, but I don't want it to have a lot on it. So let me roll it back in. So I don't want that spring to come boing, jumping out at you. I remember working on these. So I'm going to try our gel lube, which we sell in our online store. This stuff is good stuff. It's got a lot of uses other than an assembly lube. Find those screw holes. And then we'll figure out, if we get this to work, then we'll figure out why it has no compression. I just have to exercise it a little. Or maybe the rope came on. Maybe I need to give it some more wraps. Let me try wrapping this around one time. I don't want to overwind the spring. Yeah, that helped. Let me wrap it around another time. Yeah, working better. Now it's working. Just needed a little lubricant. Make sure I didn't overwind the spring. Nope. Still got some room. There we go. Now it's working. We spray a little bit right in the very back here, where it rides on that pin. Yeah, that helped too. All right, has this thing got any oil in it? Or was it underwater? Looks like it's got fresh oil in it. And it's full. All right. So it's got no compression. And this rope's about ready to break here. I don't want it to break on me while I'm trying to get it running. Come on. Come on out of there. Come on. Everything is frozen on this thing. I don't want to break it. There we go. Everything is just stuck on this thing. So that's how it hooked in. We get a pair of cotters. Tandy, put down those cotters.
I'm crazy, man. I'll do it. Just back up, all right? Not another step closer.
Tandy, put them cutters down. Turn yourself in.
Listen to her, Tandy. We don't want this to go any further than it already has.
Tandy! Cut that off. Bad part. Melt that so it doesn't fray. And I'm going to try to put a knot in there. Put a knot in there. All right. So it's got no compression. I can feel it. And I know it's got no spark. So again, we'll either have to put points in it or clean the points. Oh, this plug is in there. Doesn't want to come out. This thing may have been underwater at some point. I don't know. It's not all milky in there though. There's the plug. An all state spark plug. We'll see if we can get it to run on this one. Let me get my little light. I think it's got a stuck valve from sitting. Yeah, I can see the valve through the spark plug hole. I don't know if the cameraman can see it. There's a valve that's stuck open. If I can get that valve unstuck, the compression should come back. Carburetor, I'm sure, is going to have to be gone through. And it's got a little split here. We'll have to see. I don't think I've got a fuel tank for this. Look at the fuel line. Hard as a carp. Look at that. It's just breaking off in pieces. So let's take this thing all apart. I'm going to pull this cover off, pull the carburetor off, pull the head off, pull the flywheel off. I'm going to pull it all apart. So look, there's no governor linkages, no springs, no lever or lever coming out of the side of the block. It's all controlled through this lever on the carburetor where it says stop, run, and choke. Now I don't know how the engine senses when it's under a load, but if you look at this thing, it's in pretty bad shape. Look at, we had mud daubers or something. Now I remember these from when I worked at my brother Farrell's. I remember working on some of these. There's not much to this carburetor. The float bowl does have a drain on it, but the float bowl also has just a single, looks like a 1024 screw. Oh, look at all this crap falling out of here. There's our bowl gasket. See, the float bowl's got a smaller hole in it. Our little dump valve gasket's gone. I've got them. It's got a spacer. There's more of our bowl gasket. The bowl gasket, look at that. But it had this little spacer to keep from crushing the float bowl in there. So it doesn't have a leg that goes up and, through the center of the carburetor. It's just got this spacer and a bolt which holds everything together. The fuel is drawn up through this tube. And I can remember taking these tubes off at my brother's. And on the other side of that tube is a screen. Now this hinge pin is definitely rusted in there, so I'm going to have to be careful on trying to remove that, because if I break these little ears off that hold the float on, that's the end of this video, because I don't have a carburetor, one of these carburetors. It's got a different type needle in it, which has got a spring on the end. And I know I don't have any of them. So we're going to try to have to reuse all this. And then this thing is like frozen. I got to be careful. So to take that off, you just take this screw out right here. If it'll come off without breaking. But no governor. And of course we don't have any grass to try it on because everything's covered in snow. But that comes off. And then you're able to wiggle this and pull this out, and there's an O-ring on there. I'm going to spray some gel lube down in here. Try to work that around. Let's see if we can get this out. Here we go. It'll come out. That's all it is. This is your throttle and your choke. Ever see anything like this? Alright, so I'll get the ultrasonic cleaner fired up. You can see the valve is definitely stuck. Looks like we're pushing a little oil up through there, because I'm sure this thing was probably ran with no air cleaner on it. I don't feel any scoring or anything in there. So let me get the intake valve open. So that way we know there's no tension on that. Spray some gel lube on that stem. I might have to pull the valve cover off too. Let me try twisting this. There we go. Still stuck. Oh. Now it's working. All right, I'll take my air tool with a wire wheel on it, and I'll try to clean all this up. But the next thing I want to do is take the flywheel off. So I was able to remove the screen. It was rusted on there pretty good. I ended up having to take my propane torch and heat it up some. And then I quenched it with a little bit of water because it was pretty rusty and I didn't want to bust the end of the crankshaft off. I didn't get a cherry red, but I got it pretty hot. And I quenched it with a little bit of water. That's why you see that water on here. And then I sprayed some gel lube on there too as I was heating it to kind of soak, pull it into the threads. And then I was able to take it off with the impact without breaking it. Now, if I had broke the end of the crankshaft off, because I've done this before, then I just drill and tap the end of the crankshaft and I put a bolt in there to hold the flywheel down. So, just in case you've ever broken the end of a crankshaft off and thought, well, I'll just ruin that engine. You can just cut it flush a little bit below because you're going to want the bolt to put some tension on top of the flywheel. So I usually cut it like a 1/16 of an inch below the flywheel and then drill and tap it. It doesn't have to be perfectly centered, as close as you can get it. And then put a bolt in there with a washer to hold it down. So I'm going to pop the flywheel. I've got my knockoff tool. There's the Tacumish part number, 670103. It's a 7/16 20 thread. They make these in different sizes for different threaded flywheels. Tacumish did. So I'll put my knockoff tool on there. Put it on there and then back it off one turn. And then I'm going to use this screwdriver to put some pressure on it. Rotate it 180 degrees, put some more pressure on it. Give it a good sharp blow right in the center. This one's pretty rusted on there pretty good. That's why I'm going to keep turning it and putting pressure on it until it pops off. There we go. There's our dinner. Okay. Key still in the flywheel. So again, pretty nasty under here. All kinds of bugs and stuff living under here. Pop this off. And those points look like they're pretty corroded. So I've got a new set of points and condenser. So I'm going to get a new set from upstairs. And we'll replace the points and condenser and set them at 20 thousandths and see if we got any spark then. All right, I got brand new old stock, which is better than the new ones that Tacumish is making. We've got the original new old stock points and condenser. Now they used to put a rubber band on there to kind of, I don't know what, hold the point gap closed, and you could tell how old this is because that rubber band just deteriorated. So I could tell that these points and condenser must have been replaced at some point, and I'll tell you how I can tell that they've been replaced as soon as I can get this off. Because when this was originally assembled in the factory, the condenser wire was in this other part of this connector here, this terminal. And then when you had to replace the points condenser, they would tell you to either just pry that open and take the wire out or just cut it off. And then of course, the newer version of the condenser, they shortened it. They realized that it didn't need to be that tall. So if you looked up this back in the day and you got this is just a new and improved part. It's not the wrong part. He sent us the wrong part. Look, boss. The condenser is a little short. It's missing some. All right. So let's take a look at these points, and they are pretty bad. Not worth trying to sand on, since I've got so many sets of the new ones. Even though I probably could have sanded on them and got them to work. I've seen this too, where they'll take the old set of points condenser and put them back in the bag, and then somebody grabs them and puts them back on the shelf. We had a grass rat that visited not too long ago, and he had bought what he thought was new old stock parts off the inner screen, and the condenser was an old condenser that somebody had stuck back in the new box. But a lot of these new old stock parts that are being found on the inner screen, generally come from a mower shop that went out of business. Now they always run that wire real long, and it's in the way of the hole, so I always like to bend it down. So you need to take the condenser wire and you need to run it up along here. And then this screw, this is the ground wire from the coil, and this is the other wire from the coil for the points. And you want all those wires to run up through here, like this. This is how you do this. And then we need to tighten this screw down. But this is how you want it, just like this. Make sure they're not pinched. And then you run the wires along here inside this, so that way when you go to put the points cover back on, this kind of holds it in place. Now what I like to do is, this wire is longer than this wire by a little bit. I always like to wrap this one around this one, because that way it shortens it up. And then when you go to put it on, I like to tuck the wires in here so they don't get, touched by the spinning flywheel, which is going to chew them up. And then here's our new points. They look pretty good. I'm going to spray some carb spray on them, because they usually put some kind of sealer on there. Some kind of rust preventative to keep the contacts from rusting while they're sitting on the shelf. Those look like they're pretty good. We'll go ahead and put the points in. Real simple to do points. If you've never done it before, don't feel intimidated. It's pretty simple. Push that down. Make sure it's in there. Make sure this little pin on the end of the points here, this little pin, there's a little nub on the bottom of the points. I'll show you on the old set. That little pin, there's a hole for that to go into. So this will pivot on there. And I'll take the screw for the points. I'm not going to tighten it down, but I'm just going to get it, make sure it's all good. And then here's our little pivot point here. I'm going to loosen this up a little. And this is where you put the screwdriver so you can move the points. So now you rotate the crankshaft. I'm going to grab the blade under here. And you find the highest point of the cam here. This is the points cam. So it's low. The points are closed all around this lobe until you get to this little part here, right where the arrow is. And that's the highest point. So that's where the points are open. That's where we're going to set it to 20 thousandths. Now I want to put these wires on. So we stick the 2 wires on. Doesn't matter which one goes on there first or last. Get them on there. And then they would give you a washer, a cupped washer. And then it had this tab on there for the kill wire. So this assembly would be all assembled in the factory, and then they would just drop it on there. So since there's no kill wire on this, because you kill it by turning that valve. This is what shuts off the fuel or to the air to it. So this chokes it and this kills the motor. So we don't need a kill wire, but I'm going to stick this back on there anyway. And then that nut is an 11/32 socket. So we want that tab at the bottom. Now we can tighten that down. All right. So let me get a 20 thousandths feeler gauge. We'll set the points. I'll clean the points with a piece of paper. We'll put the flywheel on and we'll see if we got spark. Nope. I wanted a little bit of drag on there. And usually when you tighten it down, it's going to move your adjustment a little bit. That's good right there. Now you never want to take this thing off from here. Always try to leave this alone. Don't take this off. You can change this coil without taking this off. As you can see, it's slotted. There's a whole different procedure for timing this engine if you move this. The best thing to do is, if you do take this off, is try to mark it somehow, or try to get these bolts to go right back on the same spot, the marks that it left on here. But the best thing to do is just leave it alone. Don't mess with it. Just change the points condenser. Now let me get a piece of paper. Now, Sears didn't make this. Let me close them. This mower was probably made by Roper, because they were supplying Sears with power equipment back then. There was a time when Sears did actually make lawnmowers. And they made them not too far from here in Kankakee, Illinois. They had a David Bradley plant in Kankakee, where they actually made lawnmowers back then, the David Bradleys. Were actually made by Sears. Even though I've said in other videos, Sears is just a store, they didn't make anything. Well, for a while there they were. Not very long, but for a little while. Alright, let's put the points cover back on. This thing is, because if it's got spark, I'm not going to have to take it back apart then. Let's see how I got them tucked in there. We don't want nothing getting touched by the flywheel. So I'm going to go ahead and I got to clean this up. I'm going to clean these magnets with some sandpaper. I'm going to blow this out a little bit. Anytime you get rust, you know, rust expands. When things start to rust, it actually expands. That's why it's hard to get like an engine cover off an engine if the crankshaft's all rusty and you're fighting it because you didn't clean the rust off. Well, the reason you're fighting it is because that rust had made it expand. And I'll sand those laminates a little bit too. Now this plug terminal was also real rusty. So you have two choices. You could either clean it, sand it, or you could replace it. So what I did is I unbent it and then I rolled it out so it was flat and it was easy for me to sand it. Because you know that rust will create resistance. And it may not spark. And I've got my spark tester hooked up here, which we also sell on my online store. So check it out. You might want to get one of these spark testers. It's the most accurate way of checking for spark. If it doesn't jump this gap, then you got a spark issue. Instead of trying to hold the spark plug to the head, that's not an accurate way of doing it. Oh yeah, we got good spark now. Alright, so I can put the head back on. I'll look and see if I got a new gasket. What's nice about these older metal gaskets like this, you can use them over. As long as it's not damaged. But I'll go look and see if I got a new one. If not, I'm going to have to use this one over. And then we'll get this cover bolted down. I'm going to spray a little bit of dinosaur juice into the intake here, and we'll see if we can get it to run and die, and then we'll concentrate on the carburetor. And if we can get the carburetor working again, this thing should start and run and keep running. I put that original spark plug back in there. If it doesn't work, I'll put a new plug in, but I just like to see if these old plugs are still good. Now the end of the plug was all full of rust. And again, that'll create resistance. So I buffed it on the wire wheel. Clean that off. And again, like I said, I cleaned that. And another thing I did is, you get these brushes at the hardware store for like cleaning tubing and stuff with the handle on it. There was a lot of corrosion on the intake here. So I went in and cleaned it with this. These are good to have. They have different sizes of these, different diameters. So I had a smaller diameter one I used on the carburetor before I threw it in the ultrasonic cleaner. I went through and kind of scrubbed out, you know, the inside of the manifold and inside the carburetor because it was all full of that mud dauber, and figured it might, you know, speed up the cleaning of the carburetor while it's in the ultrasonic cleaner. So now I'm going to spray some dinosaur farts in the intake manifold here, in that port. Let's see if we can get this thing to lick off. Uh-oh. Oh, it wants to start. think if we get the carburetor on there, it should run. Otherwise, I might have to do a valve job on this thing. The valve sounds like it's leaking. It might seal up once I get it running. If not, I'll have to pull the valves out. So while I'm waiting for that carburetor to cook, I'm going to go ahead and pop these wheels off and get it to roll. Man, I had a hard time getting this thing off. It was so rusted. But this thing will take care of that. Got it all cleaned up. Spray a little gel lube on there. Oh yeah, look at that. Like new again. Even got the little hubcap. There's only one hubcap missing. Now I got to do the other side. Well, once I took it out of the ultrasonic cleaner, it, revealed that the bowl was all rotted. And there's a bunch of holes in there. So, I am going to fill them holes with our Taryl putty, and I'll end up blocking off that drain. So we're going to eliminate that drain because I don't have one of these bowls. The new bowl's got a bigger diameter center hole, and that spacer that goes in there is going to go right through that hole. So I can't use a new modern bowl. And then I also stuck this in my blast cabinet, being very careful not to sandblast in here because this is kind of machined. That's where that throttle goes. But I wanted to clean up that hinge pin, get the rust off of that. So now I need to get that out without breaking these ears off. Because if I break them ears off, this carburetor's junk. So I got to very carefully try to get that out. I've got some Taryl putty here, which we also sell in our online store. And this stuff, the gas won't eat it away or the oil. It's just 2 parts. You knead it, and that's what activates it. Got to knead it up real good. And it will kind of stick to your fingers sometimes. So you might need a little bit of water to wet your fingers to keep it from sticking. And then push it. Push it into those affected areas. Of course, it's going to squish through, so I can kind of and here's a little one to see how it's sticking to my gloves. And that should take care of those holes that we got in there. We'll let that set up while I try to get that pin out very carefully. Any other holes in there? I see some corrosion over here. I can get a little piece just to fill in that spot. So I heated it up a little bit, enough to break that solder loose, and then I was able to flip this up and get the needle out because I don't have this needle. It's got the rubber tip on it. So I didn't want to destroy it by putting a bunch of heat on there. So I heated it up just enough to get that solder broke loose. And then I heated it up some more. And then I tried the wax trick, rubbing the wax on there to kind of suck the wax into it. I stuck it in the vise and I gently tapped on the pin and I did start to get it to move. Then I sprayed our gel lube on there. And then I kept knocking it back and forth a little bit at a time once I got it to move. So now it's to the point where it should come out. I've got a new pin. And it takes the standard float, the 632019A, which is plastic now. It's a plastic float, which I was going to change the float anyway. I thought it was going to come out. It was moving back and forth. I thought maybe these cutters would. Might have to get a pair of pliers on it. But I'll get it out. I have to take a little punch that size, that diameter, and try driving it out the rest of the way. I just don't want to break these ears off, these little ears. That's what I had to do to get it out. So this tube is pressed in there. And I remember back in the day when I worked at Farrell's, we would take a chisel and then you would hit it on each side very lightly and it would start to bring it up. But we were replacing them, so it didn't matter. We would just whack it out of there. But I wanted to save this one. So I just lightly with the chisel on both sides kept going back and forth till it got up high enough. And then I just took a pair of side cutters like this and then kind of grabbed it and wiggled it out the rest of the way. So the reason we would have to take this off all the time is because it would suck up debris. And like I was telling you earlier, there's a screen down in there. And we're going to show you that screen under the magnifying glass. So see the screen down in there? And that screen would get plugged up and the mower wouldn't run because it couldn't draw up any fuel. So we'd have to take that tube off, clean that screen out, and then we would put a new tube in there. But since I don't have a new tube, that's why I had to be careful when I took it out so I could put it back in there. Now you could dig that screen out of there, but it just acts as like a filter. I think actually we probably did dig them screens out probably back in the day and just put the tube back in. So I want to make sure that this tube is clear and doesn't have any buildup in there, so I'm going to use one of my torch tip cleaners to kind of go through it. And then I'll make sure that screen is clear. Yeah, you can see it was picking up some stuff that it had accumulated over the years in there. So we just want to clean this out. I'll clean that screen. I'll press this back in. I'll clean up that needle. And I'll put a new bowl gasket on it. We'll put this carburetor back together. Put a new piece of fuel line on there. And then we'll see if we can get this thing to run on its own. So to press this back in, I'm just going to use a little, I've got a 3/16 deep well socket here. You could use a piece of tubing, anything you can find that you could stick over that, and then drive it back in there. And of course I got a piece of the glove stuck under there. It caught my finger. It got out of there because it didn't put a hole in it. All right, let me clean up that needle and let's get this thing back together. Well, looky here. Open the package. That one got all smashed. Good thing I buy these like 20 at a time. I gotta go get another one. Okay, I'm going to install the float bowl now, and it goes on just like all the other Takumish ones go on there, with this little ledge here, that little dip in the bowl. Has to line up with the hinge, with that pin. Oh, my little spacer, trying to show you how to do that. There we go. So remember that. This has always got to line up with the hinge, with that hinge pin on the float. All right, let me get a piece of fuel line, go find a new intake manifold gasket. I do have these air filters. Oh, I got to put that back in. Well, the carburetor's not leaking, but we tried starting it off camera and it needs a valve job. I thought maybe if I got it running, it might take care of itself, but that's not going to happen. So I got to pull all the valves out of it now. I thought I'd get lucky. I guess my luck has run out. Well, this was the valve that was sticking, and as you could tell, it probably wasn't sealing. So let me clean them up. I can resurface them. Get my 10 thousandths clearance in there. That's what Takumish has, 10 on each. 10 on intake, 10 on exhaust. Lap them back in. We'll try it again. You can see the valve is burned. And these Takumishes back in the day were notorious for burning valves, especially exhaust valves. They get so hot. So that was that. And here I'm thinking it's going to fix itself. No. Trying to cut corners. So I'm going to look for a new valve. I might have a new old stock valve. If not, I'll have to resurface that one. This intake looks good. I could probably just resurface this one. And if you notice, it's got an I on there for intake. Sometimes they'll put an X on the valve for exhaust. So you don't get them mixed up because they're made out of different steel. This steel, the exhaust valve is harder steel than the intake because it's got a lot of heat. So if you get them mixed up, this valve would burn a lot quicker than this one. It would run, but you're going to burn the face on it if you get them mixed up. You can put an exhaust valve in the intake. It'd just be harder. So let me look for a valve, see if we can get this thing back together. I had a new valve in stock, 29313B. The 29314 is the intake. So this is the exhaust. It comes with the new spring and 2 keepers and a love note. Gotta love a love note. Who doesn't love a love note? Dear Taryl, this valve kit includes a spring and cap so it can be used to replace earlier valves. 2 different upper valve spring caps are included. Use cap with .384 diameter hole on HS50 and LAV50 models only. Use cap with 1/4 inch 250 diameter hole on all other models. Well, it looks like somebody already stole the one cap out of there, because this is the keeper. And they said 2 upper caps. So this is the one we need. And if it didn't have it, we would just use that one over. No big deal. So I got to set the clearance on it. Like I said, 10 thousandths. Let me get the valves in there. Get this thing at top dead center. And then I got to set my valve clearance at 10. Then I'll go ahead and lap it in. Yeah, we're far away from that. And then you do that just by grinding off the end of the valve till you get your clearance. You can do it on a bench grinder. Just kind of turn it and use the side of the grinding wheel. And then you're going to have to keep checking it. Usually if it's 10 thousandths, you probably want to go bigger. So that way, in case you grind off too much, you usually will end up at around what you need, 10 thousandths. But I've got a valve grinding machine, so I could stick this in my grinding machine and I can squarely grind off the end of it. But all you want to do is put clearance in there. Well, I got it all back together. So let's get it on the floor and fire it up, fire it up, fire it up. All right, let's get it on the floor. Put it on choke. Uh-oh. It lives again. So my thinking is this carburetor idea probably didn't take off, because I'm sure that when you got this thing under a load, it probably bogged down because it needs that governor. I mean, it works. We don't have any grass to try it on. I need to put an air cleaner on it. And this is the air filter that would have went on there. And they use this type of spring clip to hold it on there. And I happen to have some of these left over. But there's absolutely no adjustments at all. There's no idle, there's no anything, no adjustments. It's kind of nice because you only take 2 screws and the whole carburetor comes off. You ain't got to mess around with them springs and linkages. And try it again.
probably why they junked this thing. Because that valve got burnt, and then they couldn't get it running. That's why the air cleaner was off. We were probably trying to shoot starting fluid in, and then they just pushed it to the side, and then it got forgotten about, and then somebody cleaned out their barn or whatever, and it found its way to me. And I got it going again. I can probably give it a pressure scrubbing. I don't know what I'm going to do with this. We'll keep it around here for a while, and then we'll get rid of it. But if I give it a bath, it'll look a lot better. But it runs. And it's got that same old rusty spark plug in there. Carburetor's not leaking. Sparks were shooting out. That's just that carbon. Because again, I loosened up a bunch of that stuff and tried to clean out as much as I could, but there were little bits in there that were getting shot out of the muffin. There you have it, 20-inch. Resurrected another one, an old one. Isn't that neat? And again, like I said earlier in my videos, this is a good hobby for some of you retirees to get into, because it doesn't cost you a lot of money to fix up these old antique push mowers. Clean them up, make them look good, especially if they're real odd or different models, you know, like that other Craftsman we did for Gary at H&R Pump. Now we got this Craftsman. This is about 25 years newer than that other one. Well, there you have it, grass rats. Another turd polished. So you need to follow me with your antique mowers, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Check out our web store. Maybe you want some of them items and products I showed you, the gel lube, the putty. There was something else I used, I can't remember. Oh, the spark tester. Maybe you want one of them, or maybe you want a spark plug necklace. This comes in handy in case there's an emergency and you got a fouled spark plug. You pull this off, put it in the person's mower. Now you're a hero. You went from 0 to hero. Or maybe you want this hoodie. Or maybe you want the pants I'm wearing. Or maybe you want my shoes. Or maybe you want my skivvies. None of that's for sale. I got to draw the line somewhere. And as always, grass rats, there's your dinner. Woo! Resurrected another old Sears Craftsman with the no governor system. What a weird little device, little idea that was.